Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice shirt, Doug.
Thanks. Yeah, way to go. Salty Turtle Buddies.
Yeah.
Hey, Sam, how are you? I'm Doug. Nice to meet you.
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully everybody else will be on here pretty quickly.
It's my pleasure. I think Jeremiah will be hopping on in a second. He was texting me a minute ago.
Okay, great. Excuse me. Oh, look at Hollywood over there with her shades on in the office. Check this out. My Clayton listing terminated 3 days before closing.
Kidding. I'm so
It
sorry.
took 14 days to get under contract.
What
Now
happened?
we're in multiple offers.
Well, there you go. Silver lining.
Back
Right?
on the horse. What happened?
So the agent told me that the buyers decided they didn't like that they couldn't park on the street in front of the house, which they should have figured that out.
Before you go under contract?
Also, they had to pay to break their lease, which same
You knew
thing.
that was gonna happen.
So,
Sounds like that information should have been figured out before they signed a piece of paper.
right?
Yeah,
Also, and lost their earnest money.
seriously.
My clients want to know if they could close on Saturday. I'm like, no.
On Saturday, sure.
I was like, no, you got to close for the week. Oh.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, Nate.
Well, Doug, hopefully they can go back under contract for better than what they had before.
Actually, that's what's happening. We're just
Oh,
waiting
good.
for
Signature.
signatures. Yep.
Nice.
Good morning, Air.
Good morning.
Excuse me. All right. Jeremiah, bringing some class to the meeting. Looking good, sir.
Thanks, man. Beer's looking strong.
How's it going?
It's going well. I hope you are.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Good. I've got Sam Iden on here with me as well. Sam's our new attorney. He joined us, about 3 months ago now, Sam. I believe that's right, maybe 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And Sam's got 10 years background, heavy experience in short sales as a facilitator at a firm in Asheville that handled a good number of short sales for the entire state, from the mountains all the way to the coast and in different states. So traditionally, I haven't taken on any short sales in my normal real estate closing capacity, but he's expanded it now to offer you guys great advice and assistance on these short sales. Part of our goal here today is just to educate you a little bit about maybe some of the myths and bad experiences surrounded short sales, but also hopefully to empower you with some knowledge and confidence that you can not only take these on, but win with them as well, and hopefully open up a new market for yourselves that you otherwise would maybe be spooked about from what you've heard and that happened 8 or 10 years ago. Doug, did you want to make any announcements or anything before we get going?
Just so everybody kind of knows, Jeremiah is an attorney that in Raleigh that we work with a lot, that I started working with when I started the firm. He's a great guy. He's an NC State guy too. So that's a cross he has to, burden as well. It makes him that much stronger of an individual. He's got an insane amount of character in class. So, and he's a fantastic resource, has been a fantastic resource above and beyond just the normal stuff that we ask him to help us with. And we're lucky to have a great partner like you, Jeremiah. We haven't had to deal or had the opportunity to deal with short sales a lot. Myself personally, even in 6 years, I think I've made an offer on maybe 2 short sales. One got accepted and then it didn't work out. So that's pretty much the story with short sales. And if you remember the little bit we've talked about short sales, they're anything but short as far as time frame. And basically what I always tell you to do is run, right? But hopefully Jeremiah and Sam could give us some information and maybe give us a little insight and prepare us a little bit better. So when a good opportunity does present itself for us and our clients, we're in a position to really make it work for them. So with that being said, you guys have the floor.
Thanks for the introduction, Doug. And I failed to introduce myself properly. So my name's Jeremiah. I'm with Jackson Law here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Sam's with me as well. We've got 3 offices now, one in Raleigh, one in Briar Creek, one in Apex that's moving to Cary in February, and looking to expand. Sam's going to be up in Wake Forest in the next month or 2. We handle closings from the mountains to the coast as well. I've been doing this 16 years. We're doing 200 to 300 every month now. So I eat and sleep real estate just like you guys do. This is the only thing I do. I don't practice in any other area. I've got an associate that does estate planning and business development and LLC, INC formations and that sort of thing. She can help realtors get off the ground with the businesses. Sam has come to shore up our short sale department. So I want to introduce Sam first, and I'll let him introduce himself. We're going to kind of go into, I'm the, like a role play. I'm the realtor. I'm a newbie. I'm not educated like you guys, but I'm asking questions because I've never done a short sale before and I want to get started with them. So I'll ask some questions. Sam's going to take about 2 or 3 minutes into each question. We'll have plenty of time at the end. So if you have any sorts of comments or questions, feel free to interject, but know that if you don't, you'll have some time at the end to get those answered. Sam, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So like Jeremiah said, my name's Sam Iden. My background has been in short sales specifically. When I started practicing law in 2010, I began with a firm that did nothing but short sales. And so I stuck with that unilaterally, for just over 10 years. And then Doug was mentioning a minute ago, having not seen as many short sales or really any in recent history. And so as the numbers petered down, I decided I needed to add something else to my repertoire and wound up relocating, coming back to Raleigh, originally from the area. So I, linked up with Jeremiah and started back in October. And so now you've been adding the traditional closing attorney role to my repertoire, and in addition to all the short sale experience that I bring to the table for doing those deals. So that's the short of it. If Jeremiah wants to jump in and start the Q&A, I'll get to disseminating all the information I have stored up here for you guys.
There you go. Thanks, Sam. So Sam, what is a short sale?
Short sale is any sale that's not going to pay all of the lien holders in full. So the obvious ones you're going to think about right off the bat are the mortgages, usually first and second mortgage. But with short sales, oftentimes, almost always, the sellers have some level of financial distress. So that results in other folks that are lien holders or the equivalent of a lien holder, like an HOA, that might be behind unpaid credit card judgments, tax liens, assessments by the city, things like that are all factored in as well. So the primary thing you're going to think about is the mortgages, but also be aware, especially if you've got any tips or the seller has told you outright that they're in a financially difficult situation, that there might be some other things to consider as well to, make a full payoff.
Sam, why would there be short sales after the incredible boom market we've had for the last decade?
Yeah, I think a lot of people ask themselves that question when presented with the idea of a short sale right now. Certainly, the market has been trending up for quite a few years now. But with the way coronavirus impacted the United States in the past year, one of the things that it did was resulted in the government wanting a freeze on foreclosures for FHA, USDA, and VA loans, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans, which constitute a very large percentage of home mortgages. I consider them like semi-government loans. A lot of times they fall in line with what the government wants done with those FHA, VA, USDA loans. So Fannie and Freddie haven't foreclosed either. There's been hardly any foreclosures in 2020. And thus far that's carried over into 2021. That can only go on for so long before the Band-Aid has to come off. And so at that point, you've got a year's worth of backlog, not just a traditional year's worth of backlog in foreclosures from, anybody who would have found themselves in a tough situation, nothing to do with coronavirus. But then you've got a very large number of people that lost their income, or for a period of time lost their income that resulted in them falling hopelessly behind on the mortgage. I'm sure you've heard of there being programs to get people, modifications or tack it on to the end or what have you. And some people I'm sure will qualify for those. But to get through any process with the bank, there's red tape and there's hoops you have to jump through. And people are generally bad at doing that. We'll see what happens, but I anticipate there being endless amounts of people that say, well, I wanted to keep my home and do a loan modification, but every time I talked to my bank, they had a different story about what I did or didn't provide them. And I just wound up never giving it to me. And I entered foreclosure. So that's, kind of going to be the situation that you're going to either actively look for if you're trying to find short sales, or you might stumble across just, getting a call from somebody that says, hey, I need to list my house. And I bought my house from you, or you listed my last house. Because I'm headed into foreclosure now and certainly don't want that to happen. So while the market has built up plenty of equity over the last however many years, there will be some people that haven't been in the home that long to build equity, or some people that have had their situation go so far south financially and let the default and the unpaid interest accrue over the last, it's going to be like 12 months here coming up soon, that they are in a negative equity situation. So that's where you might see a short sale coming in 2021.
Now, how will I know as an agent if a potential listing is or will soon become a short sale?
Or a payoff is the best way to learn that information. And going back to what I said a minute ago about a lot of these short sale sellers having financial hardships, if don't be afraid to ask the seller, if they're current on the mortgage, because this is really important for you to find out if you're in potential short sale territory. People don't realize how the unpaid interest accrues on their payoff statement for all of the months that they're not making mortgage payments. So over the last 10 years, I can't tell you how many times somebody told me, oh yeah, I owe 300,000 and we think it might, the offer is 320. It might be a full payoff. And we order the payoff statement and their payoff's 330,000 because of all they haven't made a payment in 18 months and escrow has been tacked on in addition to the unpaid interest and penalties and fees that have accrued. So if they're telling you it might be close, definitely get that payoff. I mean, might be best practice just to get the payoff regardless of whether you think it's a short sale or not. But definitely if you have any question about maybe this might be close, or I don't think it'll be close at my original list price, but who knows, if we have to drop the price some, then it might become close. Might as well order the payoff up front and, just to be safe.
But to that point, just to interject real quick, I know several of us have dealt with folks and they're like, okay, I have to get this number, otherwise I'm going to be in the red, right? So that when somebody says something like that, it's even that much more important not to go by just their statement or something like that, to maybe go ahead and do the extra work and have them physically go order the payoff from their lender. So you have something that day. Obviously, it's going to change the day of closing, the dates and whatever, but to make sure you've got a harder number. And don't forget, as part of the listing conversation that we have and going through the listing agreement is getting all the information about who their lender is, what their estimated payoff is, if they're aware of any other liens, et cetera, on the house. So all that should be documented as part of the process. Make sure you're asking those questions thoroughly.
Yeah, and you're going to deal with, certainly some shame and upset folks. And, as you are their counselor, as you are many other roles for them through the sales cycle. And I think part of this is just letting them know, hey, this is okay. It's not your fault. This happens to millions of people, hundreds of thousands in our own state. And you're going to help them find a way to satisfy these liens and get out of this jam on this house. There is a way out, but you help them, help us help you kind of a situation and get those payoffs ordered and be as candid as possible in that information gathering phase.
Jeremiah,
Yeah.
So if someone goes through a foreclosure process, obviously they're not able to qualify for a loan purchase for several years after that. How does a short sale affect your purchasing power going forward?
Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, from all the information that I've been given from lenders, it lengthens the period of time that you're prohibited, or shortens the period of time that you're prohibited by a couple of years. I think it's 2 or 3 years before you can get a conventional mortgage again after a short sale, or I think it's like 3 to 5 after a foreclosure. But you're probably better off getting that answer directly from a loan officer. This is just information that I've gotten secondhand.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well, that it's a year or two shorter than the foreclosure cycle.
Guys, I'm actually doing a short sale right now, and we went under contract in September. At the end of December, we renegotiated. The bank came back and said, "Oh, I don't know if we're going to accept this price. Send us what you think it might cost to fix the house so that it's up to par." So we sent that to them. They eventually agreed to the price. We re-signed a contract at the end of December. During that period, is the homeowner still making payments towards that mortgage or not?
They probably wouldn't have even gotten past the initial setup phase if they were current on the mortgage payments,
Right.
because that's one of the things on the bank's checklist, so to speak, when they're going through and reviewing a file is the homeowner current? And if the answer to that is yes, in the vast majority of circumstances, the default response from the bank will be, you have not expressed sufficient hardship, therefore the short sale request has been closed. So that's one of the things that semi-regularly comes up with sellers who talk to us, and they say, I've been robbing Peter to pay Paul for the past year to stay current on this mortgage. And as soon as I tell them, well, the good news for you is that you have to be in default to even qualify, 90+% of the time, And it depends on who their investor is. I talked earlier about FHA, VA, USDA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. All of those require you to be at least 30 days in default, and they prefer you be 90 days in default. By prefer, what I mean is if you're only 30 days or 60 days in default, they look at you with a more scrutinizing eye, so to say, is this a strategic default just to qualify for the short sale? They're going to dig deeper into the financials. Whereas once somebody's 90 plus days late, they kind of generally accept this hardship's real, and this account's not coming back to a current performing status at this point. So obviously I don't know the circumstances of the seller in your deal, but I would say the odds are very high that they stopped making payments before, you know, your buyers even looked at that property.
Sam, after I decide to take a short sale listing, what should I do next?
You want to give us a ring. You can even give us a ring before you decide you officially want to take it, because we want to, you know, go over with you the key points to be looking out for, maybe specific to your listing. You know, if you tell me that, hey, this property is in, you know, really poor condition, what approach should I use to make sure this is accounted for? With the bank, and, you know, the fact that our offer is going to be lower than all the comps in the neighborhood because those other houses aren't in terrible shape. So we're going to give you tips and pointers about what to expect there. And we're also going to send the short sale package to the client. You know, the seller has to provide the majority of the documents that the bank needs in a short sale. So if you're coming to us from the listing agent side, the package that we provide, your client's going to be able to do, you know, 80-85% of the work that needs to be done to get the complete package together that the lender needs. If you're coming to us from the buyer side, you're going to have to present, you know, 15% of the paperwork, but you'll be able to loop us in with the listing agent on that particular deal and forward along the package so we can, you know, get them on board and started with this process, so we can, you know, get your deal on the right path. But you want to touch base with us, and one of the key things that I would say is going to be the advice on every short sale is to select your listing price, you know, based on market value. You know, so what are the sold comps? You can adjust if you've got conditional issues, but the thing you don't want to list on is, okay, you know, I started this fantasy price and then I drop the list price $10,000 every week until I have an offer. That strategy doesn't work for the bank, because the bank takes steps to assign a value to the property by doing either a BPO or an appraisal. We'll probably touch on that in a little bit more depth on one of the subsequent questions from Jeremiah, but the bank's analysis really isn't going to involve looking at what you were originally listed at and how long you were on the market. They're going to be focused primarily on sold comps. And then if you have contractor estimates or a home inspection that you can present to the BPO agent or the appraiser, they can take that into consideration as well. So that's one of the key factors to keep in mind as you're first taking the listing is how you want to price it to be compatible with how the bank's going to price it later on and make sure you're on the right path.
So I'm just,
On the flip side of that, sorry, Jeremiah, just real quick. On the flip side of that, remember, if as you're working with buyers who might be interested in short sales, just because you're willing to pay the list price, it doesn't mean that the bank is ultimately going to accept that. That's the number that the seller and the agent have agreed to accept.
That's correct. And there's a lot of assumptions that are made. You know, why would it be listed if that wasn't a price that the bank was willing to take? I understand that mind frame. Unfortunately, the banks, you know, they're not proactively working on deals that don't have sales contracts in place. So their attitude is, bring us a contract, then we'll look at whether we want to approve your deal or not. And, you know, therefore, with knowing that's their frame of mind, they're not becoming involved on the front end and saying, oh, you know, we proactively conducted appraisal on this property and it was at 300,000. So that if you go get an offer for 300,000, we'll approve your short sale. It's left up to the list agent and the seller to go find the offer and bring it. Then the bank will look at it. So Doug was on point there.
No wonder it's so long of a process.
Well, that's part of it, but
Yeah.
we usually get through them. This
Can't
was
you-
clarifying some upcoming questions. We usually get through them in 2 to 3 months from the date that we submit the package. Some of them go faster, some of them go slower, depending on how many hurdles the bank might throw in our way that, you know, we only find out about as we go through it step by step. But if you have somebody who's not very familiar with the process and, you know, all the different banks and investors, it's common to hear stories about 6 to 12 months and no success at the end of the 6 to 12 months. Whereas traditionally you get about 90% of the deals that I work on eventually approved into the closing table.
But sometimes you'll see in the listing, it'll say bank approved short sale. That means the price has already been approved, right?
You will see that sometimes, and I'll caution you that you might be seeing that from an agent who had a short sale approved and then it fell through for whatever reason. And so they've felt comfortable putting in the MLS that the bank's going to approve that price again, when that is definitely not a guarantee. And when I work with agents who ask about doing that, I say, don't do that. If you talk to a prospective buyer's agent, you can let him or her know that the bank recently approved at a certain price, but that's no guarantee they will again, and that they should contact me to talk about that dynamic further. The bank, when they value a property, they usually consider a BPO valid for 90 days. They usually consider a full appraisal valid for 180 days. Whenever that expiration date hits, they discard it and they order a new one if you're still talking to them about a short sale. If your deal has died and you've gone away, they don't order a new one until you come back with a new deal. But if you're in the middle of, you know, say that you get deal number 1 approved, buyer does inspections, they waited against our advice till after they were approved to do inspections. They do their inspections and say, I don't want this at this price anymore. There's a lot of stuff wrong with it. Seller obviously doesn't have money to fix it in this scenario. So they say, no, I'm out of here. Well, say that happens and you're on day 80 of the BPO's age. And then you figure as the listing agent, well, I had this backup buyer who wanted to pay the same price. I'll just get them in here, and everybody signs the paperwork and gets it submitted. And let's say that by the time the new package is submitted, that BPO is now 95 days old. The bank's going to say, thanks for the new offer. We're looking at it. And a couple weeks later, you're going to get a phone call from a John Doe BPO agent who wants to get interior access. And you're thinking, what's that about? Well, the bank's totally thrown out the value that they used to approve the last deal, and they want to do a new one. And the new one might work out just fine, and you get your deal approved. But the new one also, you know, might go up. What if there's been 3 new sold comps in the neighborhood and all of them are higher than what your contract price was for a similar property? The price is probably going up. And then that's usually not going to be well received by the buyer side of things, and so that can, you know, create like a funnel type scenario, not funneling upward, funneling downward. So that's one of the reasons that the agents I work with, I generally tell them don't mention pre-approved price. There's like one program, if a seller on your property has an FHA loan, they're designed to be reviewed with that type of like pre-approved process. When you have an FHA short sale, they produce a letter for you at some point, and that letter is called an approval to participate, and it says on there what their appraised value was. So you may legitimately find a pre-approved price if you have a seller with an FHA short sale. Outside of that, I wouldn't trust anything I saw in a listing that says the bank's, you know, agreed to be bound by whatever price they say is going to get the deal done.
Sam, any advice for a multiple offer situation where I'm a listing agent?
Well, it's up to the seller whether they want to call for highest and best. That generally is a good idea in a short sale. We want to look at all of the offers, because there are certain dynamics that can make an offer more appealing for a short sale that might not be intuitive. A cash deal isn't necessarily attractive for a short sale. It limits the amount of expenses we can get the bank to cover. when that includes, avenues that we're trying to get the bank to kick in money to pay us so that the client that brought us in doesn't have to pay anything out of pocket. Buyers who are in a situation where they have to be in the property, as you might have already derived from things we've talked about so far, they probably are not a good candidate unless you've got a seller that wants to rent to them in the interim. And so, we'll take a look at it and let you know, outside of just how much is each party willing to offer, if a number of offers are very close to one another, here's why one might be more attractive to go with than the other.
All right, so we've got a sales contract. We are under contract. We think the bank's going to approve it. What should we do next?
Well, next we want to have the package compiled to get the ball rolling with the bank. And I touched on it briefly earlier. There's a whole lot of documents.
You're going to help me with that package, right?
Yeah, we're going to work directly with the seller. Some listing agents like to be in the loop. Some listing agents actually like to collect the documents from the seller and be the ones to hand them to us directly. There's a lot of financial documents in there, so some sellers might not want to give their listing agent copies of their pay stubs, bank statements, tax returns. It's fine with us whether it comes from the agent or the seller directly. From the buyer side, really all that's going to be needed is a signature on a few bank forms, and that's going to change based on what bank it is that we're doing a short sale with, and a pre-qual letter and proof of funds for down payment. The seller side is, like I said, pay stubs, bank statements, tax returns, hardship letter, lots of supplementary stuff. And sometimes we don't find out about additional things that the bank might want to check out until we get started. So I think Jeremiah's next question is going to be about.
Yeah, we've got our package together. What else could they ask for?
So our goal when we get the package together is to try to minimize the number of times the bank comes back and asks us for additional things as we're being reviewed. There's something we like to call the document merry-go-round, and we want to stay off of it if at all possible. So I know there's an inclination a lot of times to say, I think we've got enough documents. Let's just submit what we have and get the bank started. I think that would be best for everybody. And I understand where that line of thinking comes from. But unfortunately, the path that puts you on is, the bank sees our package, they get out their checklist and they start checking off things we have given them. And then they look at what boxes are still empty and they put it in the notes. They usually, they can't be bothered to call us and tell us or email us. They just put it in the notes and wait for us to call for an update. And when we do call for an update, they say, all right, we've got a list of things that you didn't include in your package, and here they are. And, this one might be 10 things long if we only submitted a partial package. And so then we let the seller and the buyer, if applicable, know about these 10 things that the bank needs in order to check all the boxes on their checklist. And we work on getting those 10 things together and we send them in. And then the bank says, all right, we got those. Give us a week to look at them. So we give them another week and we call them back and they say, we looked at them. 8 of those 10 things look good. One of the 10 documents, it wasn't legible. We got faxed too many times, poor quality. You need to go do that over again. And we only take wet signatures, not electronic signatures. And then document number 10, that was a bank statement and it had this deposit. It was coming from this other account there's an account number we don't have a copy of. So tell the seller, now we also need those bank statements. So say, okay, we'll go get those things for you. It takes another week, give that to the bank and they say, all right, we got them. Give us a week to look at them. And they come back and they say, okay, both of those things look good. But unfortunately, it's been a month since we first went down this path. And now we need updated bank statements and pay stubs for the original accounts you gave us because now another whole month has come out. And so you can see where this is headed. It's the document merry-go-round. And so we try to be as comprehensive as we can in the beginning. The bank usually is going to come up with an additional request or two as we move forward. But if we can keep those limited in the amount of documents the bank asks for, that greatly increases our chances of avoiding the document merry-go-round and a lot of lost time there.
Yeah, it sounds like underwriting to me right now. I'm going through a refinance myself. So we talked a little bit about market value, BPOs versus appraisals and those expiration dates, and those kind of coordinate with that document. merry-go-round. You want to keep those fresh. You want to hit it right the first time and get it done. We talked about how long the process is going to take. If I'm doing it, it's probably going to take a year and I won't get paid, right? If Sam's doing it, it's going to take 2 to 3 months, and you just heard his success rate of almost 90%, which is just insane. Did the bank agree to pay a real estate commission? Let's talk about my money. Is my commission protected?
Yep. So on almost all the deals, it's going to be a 6% real estate commission. That's what the guidelines are for FHA, VA, USDA, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac. So that's going to comprise the vast majority of short sales. If it's not one of those investors that owns the mortgage, then it's considered private. And so private, it's whatever that private investor wants to approve. It's still 6% most of the time, but occasionally it could be 5%. And I find that those are usually like jumbo loans where you get to see more private investors. So, just speaking in generalities, if you have a real estate transaction with 2 separate agencies involved, there's like a 95% chance there's going to be a full 6% commission approved. Sometimes with the private investors, if you have a dual agency, they only want to pay 4 or 5%. But most of the time it's still 6, even with a dual agency. And then for those big 5 investors I named, I'm not aware or can recall there ever being any restrictions on the commission amount due to dual agency.
So Sam, I'm in Wake County and that 6% is music to my ears. I wouldn't know about that. I'm, kind of jealous of those Durham folks and whatnot. But tell me, so my commission is safe. It doesn't matter if there's 2 liens on the property and this judgment happens and the seller is a. Get my money?
That's right. So the bank's process involves evaluating which fees that they would have to pay in an REO. They have to pay an agent there. So the thought process is, why would we not pay one in a short sale? It's going to be an eventuality anyways if they had to take it back in foreclosure. And they also are determining what fees they can pay based on what they consider reasonable and customary for a real estate transaction in that locale where the property is located. And certainly a real estate commission constitutes that. So that's the logic behind the bank agreeing to pay it. If you've ever heard a story where an agent says, I was in a short sale and they didn't pay any commission, it's because the person that was negotiating it with the bank didn't have experience or knowledge to include the real estate commission on the list of expenses that they were asking the bank to pay for. So if you don't ask the bank to pay for something, they're not going to consider it and do it. So in that particular instance, it would have made it start to finish without the bank ever having even been asked to pay real estate commission.
Now we're getting into the mechanics of the short sale. There's multiple liens on my listing. Is the bank going to pay that second mortgage? Are they going to pay those old HOAs that haven't been touched in 2 years?
Well, this kind of ties into the last question where I said that the bank has lists of things that they consider customary or that they will pay for, and then there's lists of things that they won't pay for. And those lists can change depending on, like I mentioned a few times, who the investor is. They can all have different rules, slightly from one another. And so when it comes to a second mortgage, that's pretty run of the mill. Banks are used to seeing that. They're going to make an allocation, and most banks are going to make a $6,000 allocation to the second mortgage. And most second mortgages, if they're large banks, actually do participate and agree to release their lien and settle up for that $6,000. If the second mortgage is held by a credit union or a small local bank, that can be a different story. They're far less forgiving than the large banks. The large banks, it's just, an account. You're just another number on a piece of paper. The small banks take it a lot more personally. Once you go beyond the second mortgage, it becomes a lot more iffy as to whether the bank is going to agree to pay any settlements from the sales proceeds. So if you've got an HOA balance of $1,500 or you've got an unpaid credit card for $3,000. These are things that we want to have identified on the front end and spoke to the prospective buyer about. And this can kind of tie back to Jeremiah asked a minute ago about multiple offers. If you have a multiple offer situation and you've got extra liens out there, that's a great time to talk about it. Say to each buyer's agent, hey, there's this $3,000 credit card. We're going to ask the bank to pay it, but the bank very well might say we don't pay credit card judgments, and then we're going to have to pay a settlement on that. That's going to be out of pocket. Is that something your buyer's willing to, contribute on? Keep in mind, this is a multiple offer situation, so it can be a big issue for the seller, and a lot of times you'll get traction there. And so we want to make a plan ahead of time for those liens that are anything beyond a second mortgage about, hey, we're going to try to get the bank to cover this, but if they don't, what's our plan for how we're going to get to closing with clear title? Where's that money going to come from, to make sure that we're lined up for success and not, throwing spaghetti against the wall?
What effect does the forgiveness of maybe that second lien or tens of thousands of dollars off that first lien, that first mortgage, what effect does that have on our seller? Is that income to them? Is that?
Yeah. So the bank that agrees to a short sale has two options for the debt. They can forgive it or they can not forgive it. If they don't forgive it, they could require the seller to sign a promissory note, or they could just say, oh, we'll worry about it later. And then maybe the seller gets hit with a lawsuit, 9 months from now, whatever it may be. So it's always better for the seller if the bank agrees to forgive the debt as part of the short sale. Now, when debt is forgiven, the IRS considers that income. The bank is required to issue a 1099-C. Some sellers will say, well, if I'm going to get a 1099 for the short sale, why would I do the short sale? I could just let it go to foreclosure. That's actually worse, because there's going to be more expenses, costs, and fees that build up as the foreclosure runs its course. And then when it goes to auction in the foreclosure, it's oftentimes for a lower net recovery to the bank than what the bank would have gotten out of the short sale. That's why banks are interested in the short sale. It mitigates their loss. And so all of this is building towards a larger loss for the bank. And if it's a bank that was going to forgive the debt in a short sale, they're probably a bank that's going to forgive the debt after a foreclosure. And so the 1099 is still going to be generated after the foreclosure. It's just going to be larger now. So as far as what the sellers are getting prepped for with the 1099 that's going to stem from a short sale, our role in the short sale is as a transaction facilitator. You probably already surmised it by now from my discussion, but we're engaged by both buyer and seller, and it's for the purposes of getting their deal approved. Once it's approved, they select separate buyer and seller closing attorneys. The buyer can select any closing attorney. They don't need to have an expertise in short sales. We're going to provide them the documents they need to be able to close it. It's basically the same thing as they're closing a regular deal, except there's an approval letter for the short sale rather than a payoff statement. The seller's closing attorney, we're going to link them up with somebody specific that I've worked with for the last 10 years, the same firm, because he does seller docs. That's not important. Anybody can do the seller docs. More importantly, he's a tax attorney who has for 10 years been advising our sellers on these situations where he's going to be able to tell them what amounts of that 1099 they're able to cancel out, if any, to mitigate their tax consequences. And also for the banks, the credit unions or the smaller banks who don't forgive debt, he's there to be able to go over with them a deficiency plan of, hey, you've got the following assets, and, you might want to do this with the titling of these assets in order to protect them in the event that, First Citizens Bank sues you for a judgment and tries to collect on it, sometime in the future. And so we're going to have them getting the proper advice about how to mitigate their tax bill prior to closing. But as I touched on earlier, burying the head in the sand and saying, I'll just go to foreclosure, that makes the tax burden worse than doing the short sale.
Guys, kind of put my attorney hat back on. Sorry. Kill that.
Could I jump in with a question here real quick? Could you speak to the time frame for the foreclosure process? North Carolina is a non-judicial state, from my understanding. And how does that work? Is the bank able to pause that when they're doing a short sale, or are they moving in conjunction at the same time of foreclosure and short sale like a judicial state?
The bank has the ability to do whatever they want in terms of pausing. That being said, they will hide behind, we can't stop it. The substitute trustees moving forward, and that they'll do that in instances where they just don't want deposit anymore. So if I compare, today's climate to 2012, in 2012, postponements of foreclosure activity were so commonplace that I would tell clients who said, I have a scheduled sale date coming up next month. I would even tell them, like, there's a 99% chance that you're not even gonna have to worry about that. They're just gonna postpone it, because that was the matter of the course. They were so bogged down with so many properties in default back then stemming from the recession that was just the reality of things. In about mid 2017, the pendulum had swung the complete opposite way, to where the bank wanted to get started on the foreclosure proceedings after like 120 days of missed payments, which I think is the fastest they can start per the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau regulations. And so that means after 120 days, they hire a law firm that sends the first letter that says, hey, you're in default as of this date 4 months ago, and you owe this much. And you need to pay it all right now. And then 30 days later, they send another letter that says you were told how much to pay and you didn't pay it. So now we're going to have a hearing, and that hearing is usually a month or two out. And then the hearing comes and goes. And if the seller doesn't attend or pay somebody to attend on their behalf to ask for a postponement, then a sale date will be scheduled no sooner than 21 days from that date. And so if you had a seller who didn't do anything to try to stave off foreclosure, they just buried their head in the sand, and you had a bank that was ultra aggressive on trying to get the foreclosure from start to finish as quickly as they could, probably could happen in like 6 to 7 months after the first missed payment. If you've got a seller who's really trying to do as much as they can to prohibit the bank from foreclosing on them, you're probably going to have more than a year's worth of time from the first stop payment. And then if they lift foreclosure holds and everybody who stopped making payments because of coronavirus related issues goes into foreclosure activity all at the same time, you're going to have a repeat of what the recession was, where people are going to be in default for 3 years and still not be foreclosed on because the bank's just going to be so backlogged with them.
And I guess to that point, all the county courts right now are backed up. They're half staffed, they're hardly there. Cases have been moved 6 months and a year, this kind of thing. I've been waiting on a judgment to be canceled that the IRS sent a letter on to Wake County out of Greensboro. The debtor called Wake County clerk, spoke to the clerk. She said, I'm sorry, I've got 2 bags of mail that are 2 weeks old that we haven't even touched yet. So you've got judgment cancellations sitting in envelopes that Wake County won't touch for at least 2 weeks. And I'm sure that's a similar story out for others. So, and I guess just to back up a little bit more, you guys understand, I'm sure there's a moratorium on federal backed mortgages and their foreclosure. It was the end of 2020. It's been extended to the end of January. I imagine under this new administration, it will be extended once again. I don't know for sure, but that's what I hear. All the private lenders can currently foreclose, but we're just not seeing a lot of that activity. They can, but it seems like they're slower to. And when they do, you're not going to see the quick 120-day with 2 and 3 month resolutions on the other side of filing. It's going to be this 1 year process, because they're just going to be jammed up from all the civil stuff that's been filed that they can't touch and don't have the staff or resources to get their dockets going. It's going to be a big mess for sure. And it will take time. You will see short sales. They will be the preferred avenue for a lot of sellers. that want to have a quick resolution and the best debt relief possible. Another point is, and Sam touched on this earlier, I respect that you guys have your existing relationships with any fine, real estate attorney, and we're not here to take that away. I cannot do the closing on a short sale that we facilitate. So I want your business on the short sale. If you get one, Sam is the expert. You call him, you can use your current relationship. He'll find a good seller's closing attorney that can advise on the tax consequences, on those tax consequences, which you really want your seller to hear from anyway. They just don't need somebody to prep docs. I can do that. Your attorney can do that. Anybody can do that. But it's that extra piece of taxable consequences and those strategies tailored to help the individual debtor where they are in real time. That's what that's the value for the seller. The value for you as an agent is getting paid on time, getting paid in full, getting paid as quickly as possible because you guys deserve it, damn it. And Sam's going to get you there. I had no idea anybody could have a 90% success rate. I just assumed in 16 years doing this that your normal cycle was 6 to 8 months, a year at most, and it was a coin flip to whether or not the bank was going to approve it. And I've tried them before myself. I've muddled through them. I've had them close. I've had them not close. I'm throwing up my hands. I'm done with it. I'm not going to touch them again. Sam's your man.
And then Jeremiah, there was one, I guess, dynamic I didn't expound on enough that I should have, because all the agents are probably sitting there wondering, why wouldn't we just close it once we've done it for both sides? Because that's commonplace for a closing attorney to do both sides of the deal, and that is common in resales because there's not really any potential conflict there from a financial dynamic. And when that happens, the buyer's closing attorney is still representing only the buyer. They're just doing the seller docs for a relatively small fee to the seller as a favor, so the seller doesn't have to rope in another attorney unnecessarily. So the seller is technically unrepresented in that deal. And if you carry that concept over to a short sale, that's not really feasible. You can't have the seller go unrepresented when they have this large tax issue, or if the bank is not forgiving the debt, this large potential deficiency issue that a judgment in the future could stem from. So they can't go unrepresented. You can't do the dual representation. And then there's also, if one attorney in a short sale were to represent both sides, there's a potential conflict there. What if the seller has banks that are very aggressive and they don't want to forgive any debt and they want them to sign promissory notes with 10% interest? And it might be better off for that seller to just file a bankruptcy rather than accept those terms. Well, if you're the closing attorney and you're representing the buyer at closing, your only advice to the seller should be, you need to perform, you need to go to closing. Well, if you represented the seller in negotiating, with the banks to get the approval, how does that jive? You can't. There's a conflict there. And so that's the reason why we're not a closing attorney for either side after we've been the party to get the deal approved for the two sides.
Let's talk about how does the seller pay for the facilitation that we provide?
Well, whichever side brings us in is going to be our minimum fee guarantor. And so that's oftentimes the listing agent side. So it'd be the seller would be the minimum fee guarantor, but occasionally the selling agent brings us in. And so the buyer would be our minimum fee guarantor. Our minimum fee is 1% of contract price, and it's only due upon a successful closing. So we're working on a contingent basis, just like you guys. And as long as we get the bank to pay us at least 1% from sales proceeds, then that minimum fee guarantor is off the hook. They don't have to pay us anything. We're going to try to get the bank to pay us up to 3%. We'll see how that goes. That is going to depend on how the negotiations unfold and what expenses the bank is or isn't willing to pay in that particular deal. But so say, for example, we have a short sale at $300,000. So 1%, $3,000. And if all we can get the bank to pay is $2,000, then our minimum fee guarantor is going to pay $1,000 to bridge that gap at the closing table. If we get the bank to pay us, $6,000, 2% of purchase price, then minimum fee guarantor pays nothing. And so we were essentially free to them in this transaction. And traditionally, about 80% of our deals, we're able to get the bank to pay at least our minimum fee from sales proceeds. So only about 20% of the time does our minimum fee guarantor have to pay anything. And as I touched on a moment ago, they pay zero if they don't have a successful closing.
Sam, thank you. What questions do you guys have at Ocean Air?
Okay, in terms of what's coming with these, I know the courts are like seriously backed up in North Carolina, and a lot of them, some of them are still closed or at half staff, just like Jeremiah was speaking to. Normally, for foreclosures in a non-judicial state, how would that be reflected in a county courthouse? For example, if I was wanting to prospect potential clients to try to get them to buy or help them sell their house, right? How would that look on the judicial documents at a county courthouse? Or what would I be looking for?
There's a special proceeding that's filed whenever the foreclosure process starts. So you would want to go down to the courthouse and ask in the clerk of court's office where you check there for special proceedings that were filed to let them know you were looking for properties that were entered into foreclosure. Another asset that you have for checking out which properties are in active foreclosure. This information will probably lag a little behind going down to the courthouse yourself and doing like I just said. But you can look at the websites for the substitute trustees, and they have listed upcoming sale dates. And a lot of times they'll have the property listed on there that's in active foreclosure, even without more information like when the or how much the auction is going to be. So like Brock and Scott is a big firm that handles foreclosures. So is Shapiro and Engel and Hutchins and Center. Those are the three biggest ones. And so you might want to check out their websites. But like I said, if you can get the information from the courthouse from the special proceedings that were filed, that's usually going to be a more timely avenue for identifying potential listings that you might want to talk to, because usually when it shows up on the websites I was talking about, it's been filed for a while, and you don't want to let it get too far down the foreclosure path. If we're going to head into a climate where foreclosures get postponed continuously and all the time, then I guess it really doesn't matter. But if it was going to be a climate like it was 2017 through the beginning of coronavirus, where banks were trying to rocket through foreclosure, you wouldn't want to put yourself behind the 8 ball with seeing a foreclosure that's already halfway through before you become involved. You might be short on time at that point to be able to get it listed, find a buyer, and approach the bank before the bank progresses to the point of wanting to finalize that foreclosure.
And that notice could usually be done after 120 days, correct?
Which notice?
The special proceeding to occur, that wouldn't happen until 120 days.
Right. Yeah. CFPB says 120 days is the soonest that the bank's supposed to foreclose. I'm not sure if the private lenders are beholden to the CFPB restrictions, but generally speaking, it would be unusually aggressive for a bank to start foreclosing sooner than 120 days, even if they didn't have that type of restriction on them. Banks don't really want to take REO properties or foreclose. They'd really rather just have you pay the mortgage. And so if they're still in a position where they have hope that the account is going to become a performing account again, that's really what they'd like to see. So I don't think most of them really prefer to get terribly aggressive in foreclosure.
Yeah, the kind of opening salvo on a foreclosure is the filing of what's called a substitute trustee. Any mortgage, any deed of trust that your buyer or your seller has signed is going to list probably me or your closing attorney or the bank's attorney as the initial trustee. I don't want anything to do with the foreclosure. I don't know how to do them. I don't have time for them. It's just not my role. If the bank gets to that 120 days, they've gone down the loss mitigation for the first 90 days. It's, and they've just given up hope this thing is ever going to come current. And they start the foreclosure process. The first thing they do is substitute the closing attorney trustee for someone at like Shapiro and Engel, or Brock and Scott, one of these foreclosure mills. And that lawyer is the one that takes up the case from there. That substitute trustee form is filed with the county, just like a deed or mortgage would be. So you can search for your buyer or your seller's name rather, and really keep an eye on what's going on. If you're worried that they're lying to you or just aren't, or ashamed of what's going on, you can check behind them. Any other questions, guys? Well, we really appreciate you guys taking time out of your morning to meet with us. Think the world of Doug, and I know I work a lot with you guys, with I guess with some of you guys. Those at the coast, I hope you're doing well. I'm from the coast originally, and I do miss the beach. I'm from Carolina Beach, so good for you for living the dream and being out there selling surfside property. Give us a ring. I'm super accessible by email typically, but also by phone. Sam will be the same. I'll pass Sam's contact on to Doug and he'll disseminate that. But seriously, if you guys have any short sale questions, call Sam, call me. Let's talk through this stuff. We hope that part of this presentation is taking some of the fear and uncertainty, anxiety out of a short sale and let you know this is something that you can do. This is something that you can help your friends and your sellers and those distressed properties with. It's not a lost cause. So give us a buzz. Let's talk through it, see if it makes sense to work as your facilitator and go from there. Here's to a prosperous 2021 for you guys. Good luck and holler if you need us.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah. And Sam, thank you so much. We really
Thanks, guys. It was my pleasure. Appreciate it.
Goodbye, guys.
Thanks.
bye. Everybody have a great day.
I guess that's it. We'll see you guys
Bye,
tomorrow.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.